Hello, today we are going to learn about the Mauryan Empire, the dynasty that had ruled Magadha after the Nandas were the Mauryan Empire. As we know, the founder of the Maurya dynasty or the Mauryan Empire was Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya. He was helped in this process by in the process of getting the rule by his friend Chanakya or Kaudilya. Okay, and it was during the time period of the Mauryan Empire that in India there was the political unification of the country. A major portion of our modern day India was unified under this empire, the Mauryas. And the extent of the Mauryan Empire varied with time, and it extended to to a maximum extent from Afghanistan region till Bangladesh, and from Kashmir till Karnataka. From the map, we can know that this was such a large area. There were even places outside the geographical location of modern India. So the geographical extent was roughly from Afghanistan region till Bangladesh and from Kashmir till Karnataka region. Almost till South India they had conquered. It happened during various periods of the Mauryan Empire. From the beginning, it was not such a big empire. It was a considerably a small empire, which slowly it got expanded with the continuous wars that were fought by the different kings for land expansions. Okay, so we have to learn this chapter in detail. So how do we know about history, or what are the sources of history? In history, there are basically three sources of information. One of the major sources of information is the literary sources. Literary sources means things that are written down in the form of books or inscriptions or in coins or in seals. Wherever there is any kind of writing, that those form a source of history, and those historical accounts are called as literary sources. Then there will be archaeological sources. Archaeological sources are the sources that we obtain by digging the ground. They were usually the artifacts or the things that were used by the people of olden times. We will get the remains of these things, or the some of the specimens of these things from the ground. The archaeological department will be digging the ground and they will be getting specimens, or they will be getting specimens from some other places. So all those artifacts and specimens that we get from olden days form the archaeological sources of history. And among the archaeological sources, there are one such thing which has contributed a lot of information to recreating history, and those things are the artifacts known as coins. From coins we have learned a lot, and hence we can classify them as a separate source of information, and that will be numismatic source. Numismatics means study of coins. So numismatic sources. So there are usually three types of sources: literary sources, archaeological sources, numismatic sources. There won't be all these three sources available for a certain period of time. In some historical account, maybe there will be either literary sources. Some places there will be either archaeological sources. Some places there will be either only archaeological and literary sources. In some places there will be all these three. So it depends. It varies. Okay. And for Mauryan history, we have some literary sources. Literary sources was a major important thing, source of information during Mauryan period. And one of the major literary source of information of the Mauryan period was the very famous book written by Kaudilya known as Ardhashastra. Kaudilya's Ardhashastra. It is actually a Sanskrit book. It is a Sanskrit book. Actually, Ardhashastra is a collection. It is a collection of 15 books with around 180 chapters, and it is divided into three parts. What are the three parts? The first part is, in effect, the Arthashastra is dealing with how ruling of a country should be done, how a king should rule his country. And the first part is dealing with king and his council of ministers and the rest of the people who are in relation with the king. And the second the second part is dealing with the different kinds of laws of the land, like the criminal laws and the civil laws. The second part is dealing with the civil and criminal laws. And the third part is dealing with warfare, how war should be fought. There are many things told about wars, like if you can avoid them, what all things you should do. And if you have to go for war, how you should fight, how you can win. It even states about how spying should be done, spy or espionage, how espionage should be done, how the process of spying should be done. Even there is a chapter for espionage in this book. Okay, so Kaudilya's Arthashastra was written in Sanskrit, and it was a collection of texts based on how ruling should be done. And it was such a very brilliant book on administration. It helped the ruler, it can be used by the rulers and public administrators to do efficient administration. It is divided into, it is actually a collection of 15 books divided into 3 parts. It has 180 chapters and it is divided into 3 parts. First one will be dealing with the king and his council. The second one will be dealing with the civil and criminal laws, and third part is dealing with warfare. The next source of information is Vishagadatta's Mudra Rakshasam. Vishagadatta's Mudra Rakshasam. Mudra Rakshasam means a ring that was given as a source of identification. A ring which we can say as Mudra Modiram, a ring that is given as a recognition. If a person is coming with this ring, then it means that someone has sent that person. So that is the meaning of the word Mudra Rakshasam. This is actually a Sanskrit drama, and the theme of this book is the story of how Chandragupta Maurya, with the help of his friend Kaudilya, has defeated the Nandas and established their rule in Magadha. Okay, so that story is written as a Sanskrit drama here. This is actually a Sanskrit drama, but that drama was stating the real life stories, and it also mentioned the socio-economic condition of the empire of Magadha at that period of time. Okay, the socio-economic conditions of Magadha or that region or that historical time period was also given in this book as the background setting. This book was actually written during the Gupta period. The Gupta period comes much later, as we have learned. This was written during the Gupta period, but it was talking about the Mauryan period. Okay, and the third book was Megasthenes Indica. A person called as Megasthenes had written a book about India in India, and that book was called Indica, or sometimes also known as Pax Indica. Megasthenes came to Chandragupta Maurya's court. He came to Chandragupta Maurya's court. Why? Because he was sent from the Greek country. He was sent as the Greek ambassador to Chandragupta Maurya's court. There were Greek kings who wanted to conquer India. There were Greek kings who had conquered some part of India, especially in the northwest. So there were Greek rulers near India, and they wanted to have friendly relation with the major Indian kings, and hence they sent a Greek ambassador to Chandragupta Maurya's court, and that person was Megasthenes, and he had wrote the details of all those things that he had seen here in India. The conditions that were prevalent here, the society, the ruling, those things was written by Megasthenes in his book Indica. But we couldn't retrieve or get back the whole of the book back. We only got the book in parts, like we only got very few parts of the book, not the entire book we have received, but Still, from the book we have come to know some historical information about this time period. Okay. So Megasthenes is considered as the contemporary of this king, Chandragupta Maurya. Contemporary means a person who is living at the same time as someone else, or that is something that is existent at the same period can be termed as contemporary. So the question is, Megasthenes was the contemporary of who among the following? Megasthenes was the contemporary of who among the following? 1. Chandragupta. 2. Vishnugupta. 3. Samudragupta. And 4. Skandagupta. So the question was, Megasthenes was the contemporary of who among the following? Chandragupta, B. Vishnugupta, C. Samudragupta, and D. Skandagupta. Can you guess the answer? Chandragupta was a Gupta king. This is not Chandragupta Maurya. This is the Gupta king Chandragupta. Then Samudragupta and Skandagupta were two Gupta kings. And Vishnugupta was the other name of Chanakya or Kaudilya. Megasthenes was the contemporary of Chandragupta Maurya and Vishnugupta or Kaudilya or Chanakya. And the fourth literary sources are the other sources. We are going to say about a few other sources together in this. We can state it as other sources. Other literary sources were 1. The Ceylonese Chronicles. The Ceylonese Chronicles. Ceylon was the old name of Sri Lanka. The earlier name of Sri Lanka was Ceylon. In Sri Lanka, some stories had happened. Chronicle means story. Ceylonese Chronicles means the stories of Sri Lanka. What stories were there? These were the stories of how Buddhism was spread from India to Sri Lanka. Who had spread the Buddhism in Sri Lanka? The Indian king Ashoka had sent his son Mahendra and his daughter Sangamitra to Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism there. Those stories were written in two books. They are the Dibavamsha and the Mahavamsha. The Dibavamsha and the Mahavamsha. These were Buddhist texts. And the main theme of these books were how Ashoka's son Mahendra had spread Buddhism to Sri Lanka. That was written in Dibavamsha. And it was written again with more details in an elaborate manner in the second book, Mahavamsha. So these two are Buddhist texts. And Ceylonese Chronicles are a source of Mauryan history because it was set during this period. The story of Dibavamsha and Mahavamsha happened during the Mauryan period, and hence we will get a lot of information about the Mauryan period from these books. And the other source of information are the Puranas. The Puranas were compiled during the period of the Mauryans and during the subsequent period till Guptas. And hence in the Puranas also we will get information about the Mauryan period. And hence these are the other literary sources, the Ceylonese Chronicles, the Puranas. The Ceylonese Chronicles are of two, the Dibavamsha and the Mahavamsha. The main archaeological sources of Mauryan period were the edicts or inscriptions of Ashoka. The edicts of Ashoka were the inscriptions that he had made on either stone or pillars and kept in different parts of the country. In his kingdom, he had made so many edicts or inscriptions in different parts of the country. Meaning, he'll either carve inscriptions or instructions on stones and put it in different parts, or he'll make long pillars and put inscriptions on them and put it in different parts. What are these inscriptions? These inscriptions were either instructions given to government officers how they should work, or these inscriptions would be information to the common man, like there is a hospital here, there is a veterinary clinic here, this is how you should do. And later, once Ashoka started following Buddhism, he started to make edicts. He started to make such inscriptions about Buddhism. He started to write notes or more details about Buddhism, how you can follow Buddhism, what are the good things about Buddhism, all those things he started to write. Then he had appointed government officers known as Dharma Mahamatras to spread Buddhism. And he would be writing instructions for those Dharma Mahamatras, how they should spread Buddhism, and he will be putting those inscriptions in different parts of the country. Okay, so he is basically writing inscriptions, making inscriptions for the common man to read, and hence he had made these inscriptions in the language of the common man, which was either Pali or Prakrit. He had used this language for writing the inscriptions. He had made his sculptures to make inscriptions on stones and put it in different parts of the country. And he never made inscriptions on the learned man language, that is Sanskrit. Sanskrit is only known to people who learn the Vedas. They will learn Sanskrit first, then they will learn Vedas. Only those learned people will know Sanskrit. The common man will not know Sanskrit. And hence he selected the common man's language to give them instructions. So this is the language in which they had put out the instructions. But what was the script of these edicts? Script means the method in which we write the alphabets of the language. For example, the script of English is something like this, right? Likewise, our regional language, Tamil, Malayalam, Hindi, everything has its own script. That is how we write. And the script that was used by Ashoka to spread to make these inscriptions were the Brahmi script. The Brahmi script throughout India. The Brahmi script was used by Ashoka to make these inscriptions in all the part of the country except for in the northwest. In the northwest, the prevalent script or the most famous script was the Persian script, the Kharosthi script. Ashoka had used the Kharosthi script in northwest India. Though the language was only Pali and Prakrit, he had used the Kharosthi script in northwest India. Okay. He had made many edicts and historians have classified them into major rock edicts. There were around 14 major rock edicts. Then there were pillar edicts, meaning these edicts were made on Ashoka pillars. Rock edicts were made on rocks and stones. Then there were two famous Kalinga edicts. Two famous Kalinga edicts were there. The content of these Kalinga edicts were about the Kalinga War, the famous war of Ashoka. His Rock Edict 13, also talks about his famous Kalinga War. His famous Kalinga War. Kalinga War is famous because that was the war after which Ashoka wanted to stop doing war. He started thinking that war is not good and it is just killing people. And he just gave up on war and he started to lead a peaceful life, and he also got converted into Buddhism. And most of the information about the Kalinga War is given in Rock Edict 3. And in Rock Edict 7, he had talked about how Buddhism can be spread. Sorry, there is a small correction. It was in the Pillar Edict 7 that Ashoka gave instruction of how to spread Buddhism. The main concept of Buddhism was Dharma. The main concept of Buddhism was Dharma. How to spread Dharma, what is Dharma, all those information is given in Pillar Edict 7. Okay. These are the important rock edicts and pillar edicts of These are the important rock edicts and pillar edicts of Ashoka. The Ashokan pillar and rock edicts have given so much valuable information about the Mauryan Empire and the empire during Ashoka's period. The most important Mauryan kings were Chandragupta Maurya, his son Bindusara, and his son Ashoka. There were other Mauryan kings, but these were the most important Mauryan kings. Okay. This king's name is Bindusara. We have already seen another name similar to this, that was Bimbisara. Bimbisara. Bimbisara was one of the important kings of the Haryanga dynasty of Magadha. Bimbisara and his son Ajatashatru were considered as the real founders of Magadha. Next is Chandragupta Maurya. His time period is from 322 BC till 298 BC. His ruling period is from 322 BC till 298 BC. He was the founder of Mauryan Empire. He was a very able and brave king and fought so many wars so that he can expand the empire. He was a constant threat to the Greek empire. There were Greek kings in the northwest who were defeated by Chandragupta Maurya, and he was known as Sandrocotus. He was called as Sandrocotus by the Greeks. Since they cannot pronounce the word Chandragupta, what they had called him was Sandrocotus. So Chandragupta Maurya was the king who was known as Sandrocotus by the Greek. So in northwest India, there were before Chandragupta Maurya, there was the invasion of Alexander the Great. He invaded India. He had conquered some place in northwest India, and he went back. But the places that he had conquered, he had asked his commanders, Greek commanders, to stay there and rule those places for him. Even after he died, they were ruling those places. And these commanders or the Greek officers who were ruling there had fought with Chandragupta Maurya and were defeated by him in those wars. And in 305 BC, there was a famous Greek commander, Seleucus Nicator. He fought against Chandragupta Maurya and he was finally defeated by Chandragupta Maurya, and he had to give up all the territory that he had possessed to the other side of Indus. The territories on this side of the Indus he had to give to Chandragupta Maurya. He was also defeated by Chandragupta Maurya. So Chandragupta Maurya had defeated a lot of Greek officers and kings, and they were scared of him. Like Seleucus Nicator, who had to give a big part of his territory to Chandragupta Maurya since he was defeated in 305 BC. In order to maintain friendly relations, the Greek kings had sent their ambassador Megasthenes to Chandragupta Maurya's court, and hence Megasthenes lived during the period. We came to know that Megasthenes also lived during the period of Chandragupta Maurya, and he came to his court, seen the many things there, and had written a text known as Indica. Okay. After the Vedic period, then came the around 600 BC. New religions came into existence. There were Buddhism, Jainism. Similarly, there were other religions existing during that period, like the Ajivika sect, etc. We will learn about all these religions during ancient history period in our art and culture section. Okay. So Chandragupta Maurya, when he was getting old, what he did was that he gave up his throne to his son Bindusara. He asked Bindusara to rule and said that he is not going to rule anymore. He gave up his throne for his son. And what he did was that he took up Jainism. When he got old, he became a Jainist person. He became a Jainist follower. And the famous Jainist saint Bhadrabahu had taken him as his disciple, and they, along with other Jainist monks or Jainist sages, they had went to Shravana Belagola near Mysore in Karnataka. There, since Chandragupta Maurya has become a Jainist follower, he also practiced the Jainist ways of life. For an orthodox Jainist person, when he gets old, they will take up fasting and they will die by doing fast. They will not eat anything and they will just remain meditating, and they will continue that till they die. That Jainist method of fasting, the Jainist method of fasting is known as Sallekana, meaning to avoid food. Sallekana. Our Chandragupta Maurya also practiced Sallekana and died at Shravana Belagola. Okay. And before he died, he had given the ruling to Bindusara, who became the next ruler of the Mauryan Empire. Okay. The next ruler is Bindusara, and his time period is from 298 BC till 273 BC. He was the son of Chandragupta Maurya. He was also a very fierce king. He also did a lot of war to increase the boundaries or to expand his country. It was during Bindusara's period that the Mauryan Empire had went deep down into the south. Okay, covering the Deccan region, it had gone till the south. Not the entire south, but till a lot of south towards the end of the Deccan region. He also had conducted a lot of wars. He also had defeated a lot of Greek kings, and hence he was famously known as Amitragada. He was famously known as Amitragada. Amitragada meaning the slayer of enemies. Slayer means the one who kills. The slayer of enemies. He was very famously known as Amitragada, or the slayer of enemies. Okay. Actually, the Greek had called him Amitrachetus. They cannot pronounce this, and they had called him as Amitrachetus, mainly because he defeated and killed a lot of Greek rulers. He was a supporter of the Ajivika religion, the religion of Ajivika sect. He was a supporter of the Ajivika sect. His father became a follower of Jainism. He became a follower of Ajivika sect, and his son Ashoka later becomes a Buddhist. And hence we can see a friendly relation of different religions in this family, right? Bindusara was succeeded by his son Ashoka. Before becoming the king, Ashoka was the governor of the Ujjain province. The Ujjain province. We will later study that the kingdom of Maurya was divided into 4 major provinces, and one of the provinces was Ujjain. The provinces, the head of the person who did the ruling was the governor, and usually people from the king's house, the king's family, will become the governor of the different provinces. And Ashoka, before becoming the king, he was the governor of Ujjain province. Okay, and the next ruler is Ashoka. The next ruler is Ashoka, and his ruling time period is from 273 BC till 232 BC. He was the most famous and important ruler of Mauryan Empire, and he was the ruler who had made Mauryan Empire into such a large kingdom. He had conducted so many wars. He was very much good at war, and most of the wars that he had fought, he was victorious, and he was able to expand the kingdom. Ashoka's most famous war was the Battle of Kalinga, the War of Kalinga in 261 BC. The eastern kingdom of Kalinga, the present location is around Orissa region, and Ashoka had fought a war with Kalinga in 261 BC and had defeated them, and he ultimately won the war. But after the war, when he looked around, he could see a lot of blood on the floor. It was like a sea of blood. A lot of people were killed in the war, and he felt really bad. And at the same time, a saint called as Upagupta, a Buddhist saint called as Upagupta, came and talked to him. And he had changed Ashoka's mind, and Ashoka had finally stopped doing a war. He then agreed that he will not do any war, and he will not cause any violence. And hence, with the help of Upagupta, he took up the new religion. He took up Buddhism. Under Upagupta, Ashoka had took up Buddhism. And that is the importance of Kalinga War. With the big war, with the biggest war in Ashoka's history, which is the Kalinga War, Ashoka had finally stopped doing war and he started to go on a peaceful path of non-violence and took up the religion Buddhism. Ashokan inscriptions were a big source of information about the Mauryan Empire and especially the Ashoka's period. His inscriptions has told us that the Ashokan kingdom or the Mauryan Empire extended deep down the Deccan region of India, and it has even stated that the kingdoms of the Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas were the border states of Ashoka. The Ashokan inscriptions has mentioned that in the south, the kingdoms of Keralaputras, Cholas, Pandyas and Satyaputras were the bordering states of Mauryan Empire. In the south, these states bordered the Mauryan Empire is what they have mentioned. The Keralaputras, the Cholas, the Pandyas and Satyaputras were the kingdoms that were the bordering states for the Mauryan Empire in the south. We can trace back Keralaputras as Cheras, the kingdom of Cheras, and Cholas and Pandyas we know these are the kingdoms that ruled Tamil Nadu. This was the kingdom that ruled Kerala. The Satyaputras we have no identification as to where they were ruling, but still these four names were mentioned in the Ashokan inscriptions as his neighboring countries in the south. Once Ashoka took up Buddhism, he was fascinated with the ideals of Buddhism and he wanted to teach it to his people. He wanted to spread it to different parts, not only in his kingdom but also outside the country. And hence, he appointed government officers to teach the important teachings or concepts of Buddhism. The important teaching of Buddhism was Dharma, or it was also known as Dhamma. And for spreading Dhamma or Dharma, he had appointed government officers. These are the same. Dharma. It is either said as Dharma or sometimes it is said as Dhamma. He had appointed government officers known as Dhamma Mahamatras. Dhamma Mahamatras. Or sometimes Dharma Mahamatras. Dharma Mahamatras. For the same. Or sometimes in some books it has written as Dhamma Mahamatas. Mahamatas. Everything is the same. He has appointed government officers to he was sending these government officers to different parts of the country, and they will be going there and teaching Buddha's teachings and preachings. They will be spreading Buddha's teachings, that is the Dharma or the Dhamma. So he had appointed government officers to spread Buddhism. He had made so many instructions, or he had made so many inscriptions in different parts of the country, giving different informations about Buddhism and instructions to the Dharma Mahamatras as to how to work. All those informations he had made on inscriptions. And that was not enough for him. He had sent his own son Mahendra and his daughter Sangamitra to Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism. Buddhism was the religion that got its birth in India but spread to different parts of the world like Sri Lanka, China, Nepal, Japan, etc., Indonesia, etc. Okay, so Buddhism was the religion that had got its origin in India, but it spread to the neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, China, Indonesia, etc. It was Ashoka who had conducted the third Buddhist council. He was the king who gave money and conducted the third Buddhist council. It was conducted around 240 BC. The third Buddhist council was conducted around 240 BC. And it was conducted under the guidance of the Buddhist monk Moggaliputta Tissa. Moggaliputta Tissa. It was Moggaliputta who had conducted the Buddhist council as the main Buddhist sage. He was the king who had helped in conducting the third Buddhist council, and it was conducted around 240 BC. The third Buddhist council was conducted at Pataliputra, his capital. Ashoka had stopped war, and the kings who had came after Ashoka were not that powerful. Since Ashoka had stopped war, the country lost their important army. The army was not good after that, because they did not have practice and they were not good enough after that for war. And the rulers who came after Ashoka was also not that powerful or not as strong as Ashoka. And the last ruler was Brihadratha. He was assassinated by Pushyamitra Sunga. He was killed by Pushyamitra Sunga, who had established the next dynasty, the Sungas. Okay, this was the political history of the Mauryas. Now we will look into the different features of the Mauryan Empire. Next we are going to study the Mauryan administration. In that, first we are going to look into the central government. The ruling of the central government was done by the king. In this process, he was assisted by a council of ministers. The king was assisted by a council of ministers, which was known as the Mantri Parishad. The Mantri Parishad. Who were the members of the Mantri Parishad or the council of ministers? They were the Mahamantri, the Purohita, the Senapati, and the Yuvaraja. They were the council or the officers who gave suggestions to the king in helping him to rule the country. The Mahamantri was the chief minister. The Purohita was the court priest. The Senapati was the commander of the army. The Yuvaraja was the prince of the kingdom, meaning the king's son. How do we know all this information? It is about administration, and we got to know all this information from Kaudilya's Ardhashastra. So they conducted the main rule of the kingdom of the central government. But the day-to-day administration was there, like day-to-day activities of how the government should be done, should be working. And that was conducted by officers known as Amatyas or civil servants. The Amatyas or the civil servants were the officers who conducted the daily administration or the day-to-day administration of the government. Then the government also had Dharma Mahamatras to spread Buddhism. Dharma Mahamatras to spread Buddhism. They were also a part of the government. So this was the main feature of the central government. The main duty of the revenue department was to collect the taxes or revenues which the king needed for conducting his administration. The main revenue were from land, trade, from irrigation, from pastures. Pastures means people who are owning pasture lands, grasslands, they have to pay some tax. People who are having land that is under cultivation will have to pay another tax. People who are getting things from the forest has to give tax for that. Then people who are having trade have to pay tax for that. Then ferry tax is there. Ferry tax is for people who are having transportation means like ferry or boats. Those people have to pay tax. Then there is mines. Then customs. When you are bringing products from outside, then you have to pay tax. Then if you are a craftsman, you are doing a certain craft, you have to get license for that. You have to pay license fee. All these are collected by the revenue department. And the most important feature of the tax system at this period was the land revenue for cultivation. The land tax was 1/6 of the produce. The land revenue was 1/6 of the produce. Whatever was your agricultural produce. If you have like 10 quintals of rice you have produced, then you have to give them 1/6 of the produce. 1/6 of the produce has to be given as tax to the government. So the land revenue during the Mauryan administration time was 1/6 of the produce. This is an important point. So for what purposes were this revenue collected was used? The revenue that was collected was used one for the expenses of the king and the royal family. Then the rest of it is used for constructing roads, irrigation projects, ponds, etc. for the betterment of the people. The next department is the army. The army was headed by the Senapati or the commander of the army. And according to Kaudilya, we know that the soldiers in the army were paid in cash. Some kings usually pay higher government officers with land as their salary. They will be given big pieces of land, and from those land, these higher government officers can collect tax. That kind of system was not used or practiced under the Mauryas. Under the Mauryas, they were the people or the soldiers and the government officers were paid in form of cash. Okay, and the army was divided into 6 wings. There were 6 wings for the armies, and each wing was, the 6 wings were controlled by a separate board of people. There were actually 6 boards. The army was divided into 6 wings with 6 boards to control each wing, and each board had a participation of 5 members. There were 6 wings to the army, meaning the army was of like 6 types, like the navy, like the armed force, like that, soldiers on horse, like soldiers on elephants, like that. There were 6 wings to the army. Each wing was controlled by a separate board, meaning for 6 wings there was 6 boards, and in each board there were 5 members, and they took the decisions and controlled each wing of the army, which was right under all of this was under the Senapati, and hence there was a good division, or there was a good structure of army during the Mauryan period, and the soldiers of the army were kept satisfied by paying them enough salary, that too in cash, in the form of cash. Okay, and each wing of the army was headed by a superintendent, known as Adhyaksh. Each wing of the army was headed by a superintendent known as Adhyaksha. There was a department for commerce and industry that controlled the trade activities, and one of their main features was that they controlled the price of goods. They controlled both the wholesale and the retail price of goods. The wholesale and retail price of goods were controlled by this department, so that the people can have a very safe economic environment in the country. Okay, and there were government officials also known as Adhyakshas, who had ensured that there was proper supply of all the required materials. There were officers who had were known as Adhyakshas, and their main duty was to ensure that there was a proper supply of all the essential materials. All the essential materials were available in the market. No person was trying to hide away the material and create shortage for them and to cause the money to increase. And that was not there, because this department worked properly. This department also took care that all the merchants and tradesmen did proper practices of trade and had proper and used only proper weights and measures. They were not doing any malpractice and changing the measures to make profit. They ensured that the tradesmen and merchants were only having proper weights and measures. And the commerce and industry department also applied customs duty on products that were imported from outside region. This department was meant to levy taxes on imports from foreign countries, or the customs duty. The customs duty was imposed by the Commerce Department. Okay, these were the duties of the Department of Commerce and Industry. Considering the judiciary of the Mauryan Empire, there were both criminal and civil courts. There were both criminal and civil courts in the empire. There was a main court at the center, and the main judge of the central court was known as Dharmadhikaran. Dharmadhikaran. He is equivalent to the Chief Justice of India. The Dharmadhikaran is the main judge of the central court in the country. He is equivalent to the Chief Justice of India. And then there were police stations at all important centers, at all principal centers. There was a police station. The Mauryans had a permanent census system. They took the number of all the people from the villages, and they even had the number of pets or animals that were kept in a house. There was an efficient and permanent census department, and they even had the number of animals domesticated by the people. They even had the number of animals kept by each person. One of the important feature of the census was that they had so much information when they were taking the census. Census was the count of the population. They took not only the number of the people, they also took the caste to which these people are belonging, the occupation that these people are doing, and the animals, and even the animals that they are having at home. All these things were taken care of in the census. Next is the provincial and local administration. The kingdom was divided into 4 provinces. They were the Takshila, the Ujjain, Suvarnagiri, and Kalinga. These were, other than the central capital, these were the 4 provinces of the country. The country was divided into 4 provinces, and these provinces had their own capital, and these provinces were headed or ruled by a governor. The governors of the provinces usually came from the royal household, from the family of the king itself. And the provinces were divided into districts. Provinces are similar to our states, and the provinces were divided into districts, and the districts were under the rule of the Rajukas. The Rajukas are similar to the modern district collector. The administration of the districts were done by the Rajukas. The district administration is done by Rajukas. The provinces are there, states are there. They are subdivided into districts, and the district administration is by Rajukas. And the districts are subdivided into villages and cities. And the districts are subdivided into villages and cities. The village administration, or the head of the villages, are known as Gramanis. The head of the villages were known as Gramanis. And the city administration. The city administration was done by government officers known as Nagarika. The city administration was done by Nagarika. Hence, the country was divided into provinces. The provincial administration was done by governors, and they were subdivided into districts. And the district administration was done by Rajukas. Districts are either subdivided into villages or cities. The village administration was done by Gramani, and the city administration was done by Nagarika. According to Megasthenes, the administration was divided into 6 committees. The administration was divided into 6 committees, and each committee had 5 members. Each committee had 5 members to look after the matters of the committee. And the committees were industries. There was a committee relating to all the industries. There was a committee that was in charge of the administration of the different industries in the country. Then there was a committee to take care of all the foreigners who had come to the country. There was a committee for foreigners, and there was a committee for trade. to look after the matters of trade. Then there was a committee for manufacture and sale of goods. There was a committee for looking after the manufacture and sale of goods. And there was a committee for collection of sales tax. There was a committee for collection of sales tax. And there was this last committee for registration of birth and death. There was a committee for the registration of births and deaths. So they are constantly counting the number of people who are born, and the number of people who are dying, the number of people who are visiting. Then they are looking after all the industries. Then they are looking after all the production of manufacture and sale of goods. And they are having a department for collection of sales tax. These were the main committees that were used for administration, and each committee has 5 members. Okay, these are the elements of the Mauryan administration. Next, we are going to look into the causes for the decline of the Mauryan Empire. The first cause was for the decline of the Mauryan Empire was disintegration of the policies of Ashoka. Ashoka had efficient policies for administration and for maintaining army, etc. These policies disintegrated after the death of Ashoka. So disintegration of Ashokan policies and the weak successes of Ashoka had contributed enormously to the decline of the civilization. So the first reason for the decline was the decline of the Ashokan policies and his weak successors who were not able to manage the vast kingdom. And the second cause for decline was that the country slowly became economically weak, and they did not have the resources to manage such a large empire. The weakening of resources needed for managing such a large empire. That was the second reason. And the third reason was Ashoka's Buddhist support. The pro-Buddhist approach of Ashoka had caused negative effect among other people like the Brahmins. The Brahmins became opposing to the rulers since they started supporting the Buddhism. And Ashoka's pro-Buddhist approach had antagonized or anchored the Brahmins, who later revolted. And as we know, Pushyamitra Sunga belonged to the Brahmanical dynasty, who had defeated the last Mauryan ruler, the Brihadrata. Okay, and the next cause of decline was the stopping of violence, or the policy of non-violence of Ashoka had made the army useless. The policy of non-violence had made the army not good enough for a battle, and hence anyone could easily attack the kingdom. And at a later period of time after Ashoka's death, the kingdom was divided into two between his grandson and grandsons, and because of the decline and the division of the empire, that also weakened the empire both economically and politically. And after Ashoka's period, the power or administration were abused by the weak rulers. The weak rulers and other people had abused the ruling, and they had just used the wealth of the kingdom and not managed it properly, and hence that also led to the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So these are the reasons for the decline of the Mauryan Empire. It was the decline in the Ashokan policies and his weak successors. Then there were lack of political and economic institutions required to run the empire. Those institutions were lacking. Then Ashoka's support of Buddhism made Brahmins again go against the Mauryan Empire. Then the policy of non-violence had made the army very useless. Then there was the partition of the empire that had weakened it, and there was administrative abuse after Ashoka's period that had also weakened the empire. And with that, around 187 BC, the Mauryan Empire came to an end, and the next dynasty that ruled Magadha was the Sungas, which was a Brahmanical dynasty. We will learn that in the next class.